Hi, I'm Darren Llewellyn. Let's talk about electrical stuff. What I want to talk about is that only qualified people should be allowed to work on electrical equipment that hasn't been de-energized. A lot goes into who is a qualified, who is an unqualified person. It goes beyond this video today, but I want you to think about this in terms of this story. See if this sounds familiar. Somewhere in your facility there's a piece of equipment that every once in a while trips out. A motor will trip out. The operator will supposed to call maintenance, say, hey, my motor tripped out. Maybe it's a pump, maybe it's a conveyor, or it could be any number of pieces of equipment. What's supposed to happen is that the operator is supposed to get on the phone and call the maintenance department. The maintenance department can come out and see if there's a mechanical problem or something that needs looked at. If there's smoke coming off the motor, that's a problem, needs looked at. And then the mechanic, or the maintenance person, when it sees that there's no mechanical issues, no electrical issues, perhaps the machine was just asked to overwork. Maybe it's a conveyor belt, it has too much stuff on it. Maybe it's a gravel conveyor and it's overloaded. Maybe it's a crusher, it's overloaded. All kinds of things could happen. Electric motors are kind of crazy. When you ask them to do too much work, they'll do it. Whatever you ask them to do, they will try to do it, even if it burns them up, tears them up, and destroys itself. This is why we have to protect them. There's a device in the control panel generally called a motor starter. At the bottom of that motor starter is an overload relay. That overload relay has some sensors in it. We generally call them heaters. When the motor pulls too much current, those heaters get too hot, they cause a reaction, causes that overload contact to trip, shuts off the motor. So we protect the motor from itself because left on its own, it will kill itself trying to please you. Now, here's what's supposed to happen. The operator's supposed to ask for maintenance assistance. Hey, come look at this thing. My motor tripped out. Is there a problem? What may also happen, this might be a common occurrence, and the operator knows immediately that they have overloaded the equipment and mechanically will remove whatever's caused the overload and go on from there. Well, here's where the electrical safety rub comes. Where is that overload device? It's in the control panel. Now, sometimes those devices can be reset from outside the control panel. There's a little extension and a button outside that says reset, and they can reset that button or reset that overload relay without being exposed to electrical conductors inside that cabinet. That's the best situation. As long as the motor's not just tripping out 100 times a shift and the operator just keeps hitting the reset button, that will destroy the motor long term. But let's say this is the scenario. This is what happens. After working at the facility for a few years, the operator learns where that reset button is. There's no external reset for it. You have to open the control panel. Inside is a reset button. This operator has watched the maintenance personnel for years open that panel, reach in there and reset that button, close the panel, say something rude, and then walk off, right? We're maintenance people. That's what we're supposed to do. Well, the problem is the operator thinks that they can do this also. You know, they're like, well, I'm not going to call Bubba in maintenance again because he's rude every time he comes out here, so I'm just going to reset that myself. He makes, Bubba makes $2 more an hour, and all he does is pushes the button. Well, what the operator doesn't realize is that the maintenance staff has been trained on how to push that button safely. Maybe the operator didn't notice that the maintenance personnel were wearing a rubber glove with an insulated protector over it. Maybe they didn't recognize that the clothing that the maintenance person was wearing was arc rated, flame resistant. Maybe they didn't notice that the maintenance person was wearing a hard hat with a face shield when he did this. So you never know what wasn't noticed, but the important thing is maintenance personnel were trained on how to push this button. the operator wasn't. So back to our story. If the operator gets the idea that they can reset that button, they'll open up the control panel, reach in there and reset that button, and off they go. Well, the problem is maybe that works once or twice or 100 times. But on that 101st time, 101st time, what happens is they push that button, they get distracted, their hand moves off and they touch some shiny parts that happen to be 480 volts. Because on that same device that they're resetting, they're probably resetting a 120 volt control circuit, but on that same device very nearby. Like if your thumb's on that reset button, your knuckles would be very close to the 480. So they get distracted, they get shocked. Now, doesn't matter if you've done this 100 times and not got killed, or 1,000 times or 10,000 times. All that matters is that one time you did it wrong and then you died. So you don't get any credit for all those other times. You don't get any credit for all the times you did it right. You only get punished for that one time you did it wrong. So we have to keep unqualified people out of electrical cabinets. We can't let them reset motor starters like that. And when I came up in the 80s working in factories in maintenance, electrical maintenance and repair, this was a common thing and happened all the time. The operators learned where those buttons were. I remember a time back in the late 80s working in a tile plant in Indiana, and it was common that maintenance would actually teach the operators, if a machine got bound up, a loading machine that loaded rail cars with tile got bound up, if you take a screwdriver and push in on this relay right here, it would trigger all the drive motors and the thing would come up. And looking back, that's a horrible thing, but that was 30 years ago. So things have changed, I hope. Probably the biggest problem I've ever run across with an unqualified person being in an electrical cabinet was when I worked at a plastics plant. We made trash bags and all kinds of overwrap for different food products and what have you. But there was a large extruder cabinet, and it had a large DC drive in it. And I was called out to fix this one day. I opened up the cabinet. Down in the bottom of the cabinet, it's a big cabinet, so there's lots of extra room, was a lunch bucket. It was the operators of that machine. Every morning, he came to work, put his lunch bucket in there. Now, what he didn't realize was that right there were some heat sinks right in front of his face when he bent down to put that bucket in there, and there was a 600 volt DC bus on those heat sinks. So he could have got his bald head right into that and gotten killed. The reason he put his bucket in there is that cabinet was air conditioned because it had electronic gear in it, so we kept it air conditioned. So to him it made sense. Put his bucket in there. So these are the things we got to look for. If this is a habit, if this is a thing that's gone on for 30 years in your facility and no one's gotten killed yet, I don't care. It's got to stop now. We can't let unqualified people in control cabinets, in disconnects, exposed to any live circuit parts. OSHA has written a lot of citations to companies where they've had employees that were unqualified accessing these equipment cabinets, so we can't do that. The other thing that can happen sometimes, if you have electrical maintenance staff that have been there for a long time, maybe it's even your best electrical staff, if they have not received electrical safety training, in OSHA's eyes, they are unqualified. So if one of your maintenance people has not received electrical safety training, they're in a cabinet and OSHA's there, they'll ask, let me see your training records. If they see that this person has not received electrical safety training, even though you've called them electrician for 25 years, you've called them multi-craft maintenance for 15 years, whatever, it doesn't matter. if you can't prove and show and document, verify that they've received electrical safety training, in OSHA's eyes, they're unqualified, and you'll get the same citation. Thanks for joining me. I'm Darren Llewellyn. Until next time.